I want to thank you for participating in these small groups at St. Charles Borromeo during this year of Eucharistic revival. It's our hope that by spending time with one another and reflecting upon the themes that surround the Holy Eucharist, we'll grow together in our faith. We'll grow in faith with God, our relationship with one another, and even our relationship with Jesus in the Holy Eucharist. In this first month of September, our focus is just on the Eucharist in general. What does the Eucharist mean to me? How does it impact my life? It begins to get us thinking about all of these questions that maybe we sometimes just take for granted. In just a few moments, you'll hear some reflections, not only from me, but also from fellow members of our parish. It's good to hear their answers, to hear them reflect upon Eucharistic theology. It gets our own minds and our own hearts thinking. And I hope as you hear their answers, you'll begin answering the questions for yourselves. After this video, then, you'll have the opportunity to spend some time in your small group sharing your own reflections, answering the questions for yourself. And as each month rolls on and a different theme and a different element of the Eucharist is presented, hopefully by the end, we will all have a much deeper understanding and appreciation for this great gift that the Lord gave us, the Holy Eucharist, as we enter into this year of revival together here at St. Charles. What does the Eucharist mean to me?
I feel like that's a big question.
What does the Eucharist mean to me?
It's kind of hard to explain.
There's probably nothing more central in the life of a Catholic than Holy Communion or the Holy Eucharist. I mean, when I think about the centrality of the Eucharist in our church, you just can't think about being Catholic without thinking about the tabernacle, Holy Communion, the Mass, the Eucharist. So the Eucharist really does anchor who we are and forms our life. It forms our identity, I think, without even knowing it.
It's just such a part of me.
Really everything. I grew up Catholic, but until I was in my mid-40s, I didn't understand Christ's true presence in the Eucharist.
I mean, it means a lot as a devout Catholic and somebody who's been trying to foster a deeper relationship with Jesus. And that's him physically on earth. That's the only physical manifestation of Jesus we have. So I think it's a big deal.
When I think about the Eucharist, particularly as a priest, and what that means to me, there's almost an inseparability. I've thought and I've talked a lot of times about how the Eucharist and priesthood, holy orders, are twin sacraments, that they were born together on Holy Thursday, and they continue to nourish one another. You can't have the Eucharist without the priesthood, and you can't have priesthood without the Eucharist.
Especially when we went through COVID and we couldn't have the Eucharist and we couldn't celebrate Mass together as a community to worship Jesus, I just feel lost without it. So Jesus is kind of like my heart and soul, and without it, I don't know how people can survive without Jesus in the Eucharist, because that just gives meaning to the whole world.
Almost 10 years ago, I was at an in-service training, and the person mentioned Eucharistic miracles. And I'd never heard of Eucharistic miracles before. So I did some research, and that's when I truly came to understand, or at least believe in the true presence of Christ in the Eucharist. That truly has remade who I am as a Catholic, understanding Christ present in the Eucharist, understanding his body, blood, soul, and divinity are there, making me truly appreciate why we come to Mass is to really celebrate that feast.
I think when I look back on it, I went to Catholic school my whole life, and I wish I had been introduced to Jesus in the Eucharist, Eucharistic adoration in particular, sooner. Obviously, Jesus was always present at Mass. And As far as I know, I think I always believed that. I don't remember a time not believing that. But I don't think I was really introduced to Eucharistic adoration until I was in college. And that's about the time in my life when my faith started to really deepen in a more mature way. And I definitely think having a weekly hour of adoration was part of that.
Several years ago, when I was in Hartington at Holy Trinity, and we were building a new set of parish offices and a rectory, one of the areas on the rectory, the design, was to have a small chapel added to the rectory. And I remember somebody asked me once, why do you need a chapel in the rectory in your house? And it wasn't until I thought about that, first of all, and then had to explain that for the priest who doesn't have the wife, the children, the family, the principal relationship that I have as a human being is my relationship with Jesus Christ in the Eucharist. And so it's part of who I am as a priest to be able to go into that room, to close the door, and to be with the Lord in a particular way that nourishes who I am. Like, I learn how to be a priest from spending time with Christ in the Eucharist, and that informs then my ministry for the people. And so when I think about the Eucharist in my own life, I can't think of my life without it. I don't know what my life would be like without that rhythm of the Eucharist running through it. St. Charles Borromeo had a rule in his sacristy in the Cathedral of Milan. I think he even had a sign posted, and the sign was one word: silence. That when you were in the sacristy before Mass with St. Charles himself, you didn't fool around in the sacristy, that the sacristy was a place to dispose yourself. I remember reading something from him one time where he was speaking to priests who must have been complaining about how they were distracted in prayer or not ready to celebrate the Eucharist or to pray their prayers in church. And the question that he bounced back to them was, well, what were you doing in the sacristy before you came out here? Taking time to prepare our hearts for the Eucharist is absolutely critical. The world spins around us so much that if I'm going to encounter the sacrament of sacraments, if I'm going to encounter Jesus' life, death, and resurrection on our altar when we celebrate the Mass, I need to get ready for that. Otherwise, it's going to go by and I'm going to miss it. There have been times, sure, when I've celebrated Mass and I have to stop and think, was I even paying attention? Did I really intend what I was doing? So taking that time to prepare for the Eucharist, especially for the Sunday Eucharist, that's important. The ways that I do that in my own life, first of all, for me, Sunday is a special day. So when I get ready to go over to church for Sunday Mass, I dress up. Even though I'm going to be in vestments and no one's going to see what I'm wearing, I put on my cassock or I put on my suit. I don't wear just my regular blacks, my regular collar and whatnot. I wear my dress clerical clothing. And I do that because it prepares my body and therefore then my mind and what I'm about to do. It just prepares me that I'm going someplace special and I'm doing something special, and Sunday is special. So one of the ways I prepare for that is to dress up.
A little bit differently lately, because I was just at a retreat a few weeks ago, and the priest there said, throughout your week, as you're praying for people, mentally place them in the chalice with Jesus. And I was like, wow, that's really it just really warmed my heart that when we pray for Jesus or pray for people and want them to be a part of the Eucharist, like I am a part of the Eucharist, or Jesus is a part of me in the Eucharist. I don't know, it was just a whole new way of looking at the Eucharist and how Jesus is just a part of our lives. He allows us to be a tabernacle for him, like Mary was. I want everybody to feel that and to know that Jesus is truly in the Eucharist. Body, soul, divinity, all of that.
Our goal each week is to be at Mass early enough for some quiet reflection. When I say the penitential rite, that I truly am thinking about those things that I've done since the last time I received the Eucharist, and making sure that I'm truly ready, that I do, not that we can ever deserve it, but that I'm as ready as I can possibly be. I pray St. Thomas Aquinas' prayer before the Mass, which truly gives me a chance to reflect on what the purpose of the Eucharist is, how I'm allowed to heal my blindness, to really come to the Lord and ask for forgiveness for all the things that I've done this week, and really be present with him. And so I pray that prayer before I go to Mass on a daily basis with my students, and I pray that that prayer on Sundays before Mass.
I guess for going to Mass, now that I think about it, there's probably just more I should do to prepare. We obviously have a lot of young children, and so sometimes when you're like sitting down for Mass, I can't necessarily like have the quiet and peace I would like to be in my heart kind of going into Mass. But certainly we prepare in terms of you dress your best for Mass. This is Jesus. He's going to be physically present. So we take that seriously, and we're going to dress like it's important. For our family, that's always been a big deal, and that's how it was for me growing up too. There have been different times in my life where I've read the readings for Mass ahead of time. Going up to communion, if I don't have a crying child or something right in front of me, I try to, in my heart, I ask Mary to be with me to receive Jesus. She received Jesus perfectly, and so I feel like she's the best person for us to emulate. So I'll ask for her to be with me as I go to receive Jesus.
I make sure that I'm done eating before before that hour before receiving communion. I mean, the church requires it, but I try to be conscious about that. Like, I'm creating that space within me. Like, okay, I'm done eating now, and I'm putting the food away, or I'm putting the dishes away, and I recognize that I've entered into this period of fasting. So there's an emptiness in my heart.
I know in preparation for the Eucharist, now that I understand that it's God, I try to be as reverent as possible in preparation while Father's saying the Eucharistic prayers. I know I knew those words from an early age going to Mass. I knew the words that the priest was saying, but now that I understand truly, well, understand may not be the right word, but at least I appreciate the Transfiguration. I know that I'm kneeling before God, and so I want to do everything I can to show that total reverence to him as I prepare. And so I kneel as best I'm able. I prepare myself.
For adoration, I'm fortunate enough that I'm able to go to adoration a couple times a week in a typical week. I work near St. James, and they have, I don't know if it's 24/7 adoration, but a lot of adoration times, and so I can go on my lunch break, usually just for about 20 minutes. But going into that adoration chapel, and Jesus is exposed in the monstrance, I guess you prepare with reverence, again, trying to prepare my heart to be present to Jesus as he is present to me, genuflecting, bowing, very cognizant that he's right there, and also just when I start my prayer, I guess asking for Mary's help again, that I can listen to the Holy Spirit, and just, I don't know, make my heart fully available to her Son who's there in the room with me.
Sometimes I try to read the readings beforehand. I'm not always real good at that one. Just kind of sit And I try to listen. I'm not real good at listening yet either. It's taken me a lot of years and I'm still not very good at it. Just to kind of focus, try to get rid of all the craziness from the world and focus on what is about to happen.
And I think the third principal way that I prepare for celebrating the Eucharist is by getting vested. It's funny that the Eucharist is such an interior thing, but there's so much exteriority to the celebration of the Eucharist, that putting on the layers, and I can't tell you how many times the kids in the sacristy will watch me get vested, and they're like, wow, you put on a lot of layers. And boy, that's true. You have to put on the different layers, the amice that covers the shoulders and the neck, the alb that is the baptismal garment that just clothes everything in white. Here I am in black, and everything is just turned white with the alb. The cincture that ties it all together and represents that charity that is under control and given totally to the Lord. The priestly stole that is worn to remind me of the yoke, the work that is being done in the Eucharist. And then the Mass vestment itself, the chasuble that covers everything. And there's such a joyousness about that vestment, the rich color and the decoration. And even though I don't get to see it, I know that it helps in the prayer of others. And so putting on those vestments makes me feel like I am stepping up to the sacrifice, that I'm preparing myself to do the work of the Lord. And those are the ways that I prepare for the Eucharist. I think the Eucharist helps me to live my life as a Christian, as a priest, from a number of different angles. First of all, spiritually, there's things that I don't even realize. I have no idea the graces that God is communicating, the things that He's doing in my life. I don't really know half the time how I am being fed, just that I'm being fed. I guess it's like when I eat breakfast. I know I have to eat some protein, otherwise halfway through the morning, I'm going to be hungry and my stomach's going to be growling. But I don't pay attention to the nutrients necessarily that are going in me. And I think that's the way it is with the Eucharist sometimes. I don't know how the Lord is strengthening me, but I know that He is strengthening me. So just the fact of regularly coming to the Eucharistic table, I know that's important. That rhythm is important. The rhythm of the Eucharist then defines who I am and how I live.
My first temptation is to say it doesn't influence my life as much as it should. We go to Mass every Sunday. I have nearly my entire life. I think I could count on one hand how many times I've missed Mass. Yeah, I definitely built my schedule around going to Mass on Sundays, all holy days of obligation. Times in my life where I've built my life around going to that almost every day of the week. And that's a real gift and a real blessing. I don't know that would not be easy to fit into our schedules the way it is now.
It's Jesus, and if Jesus isn't a part of my life, it's just hard to live. I think it's hard to live life without Jesus and without knowing that He is there to help in everything that I do. And He is also right there and forgiving me when I do really crazy things. Just knowing that I have just received Jesus and that he's just a part of me. I don't know if it feels different. It's just, well, maybe it does. It's just maybe the warm, and it's kind of a warm, fuzzy feeling.
It's made me understand. I know some people have heard me tell the story about when I truly came to believe in the transfiguration, the transubstantiation, and being in one of the pews and breaking down into tears when we said, Lord, I'm not worthy that you should enter under my roof, because I know there's nothing I can do that will ever make me worthy. It's His grace. We just came from Mass, and I got goosebumps as I received the Eucharist and turned to head back to my seat. I got goosebumps, just that thought again that God has entered my body, and now allowing Him to impact my soul and make me a better person. It's such a cool feeling.
I'll tell you, I am conscious when I step up to the altar of my own unworthiness and of my sinfulness. And I am aware if I need to go to confession, like if I am aware of the sins that I have committed or the areas of my life that need healing, and I've put that off or I have not dealt with that, I feel an ickiness if I approach the altar in that state. And so I guess in some ways the Eucharist is a great motivator for me, because I don't want to bring that garbage to the altar. I don't want to bring the Lord into this house if it's not ready to receive Him. And so I think the Eucharist not only helps me to avoid sin, but it also becomes a motivator, just a psychological motivator to not sin. And if I do, to seek out confession and to really let that guide how I live my day-to-day life. Like, you can't fall into that sin. You may be feeling a temptation right now, but you can't do that, because that's going to limit your participation in the Eucharist, or you're going to do something you shouldn't do with the sacred body of the Lord. So that's probably the biggest thing that motivates me. But I think on the other hand, the way the Eucharist moves me in my life, obviously the Eucharist and charity are tied together. And it is charity. It's the sacrament of charity. And so I think that if I didn't have the Eucharist grounding my life, I don't know that I would be a good person. I don't know that I would be, I'm not saying I am a good person by any stretch of the imagination, but I don't think that I would be, I would have the desire to be a good person. Like, I know I have to reach out. I know I have to take time with someone. I know I have to be more gentle. I know I have to show love and concern and compassion, because the Eucharist has formed me. This is who I am. This is what Christ did. He laid down His life. He gave Himself. And so for me, that's kind of what I have to do. And so the Eucharist, I think, not only encourages me to do that, but I think the Eucharist also then gives me the ability to do that through grace.
As Dan and I kind of moved around to different towns, it was always, my prayer was always, okay, who are we here to help? Because we lived in several different locations. And at the time, I would never really know who it was. But after we left, it's like, oh yeah, we were there to help so-and-so. And I think it was because we had faith in Jesus that we could do those things, and that I could move everywhere. It's like, okay, Jesus, what do you got in store for us now? If people have not done adoration, even if it's only 10 or 15 minutes, one time in adoration, I was doing a prayer, and the first line was, praise me, Jesus, my love. And I didn't get past that line for a long time. Just like, yes, He is my love, and He is what helps me through the day. And again, it's really nice to sit quietly with Jesus. I'm still working on that one.
Having that adoration time during the week, I don't think I realize how much it impacts me until I go a week without it, or a day. It's usually 2 days a week for me. If I miss one of those days for whatever reason, I have a work meeting somewhere else, or we're gone, I definitely miss it when it's gone. And I pray other days, so it's not just about the prayer. It's something about being there with Him physically. I think it changes my heart in a way that I don't always see, because it changes it slowly and gradually. And I hope that's something that I can always, I guess, continue to have in my life. I may change jobs. I may not go down to St. James for my whole life, but hopefully that being able to go to Eucharistic adoration can be a regular part of my life and a regular thing we can involve our kids with.
There are many days at school masses when I'm feeling a little under the weather or a little whatever the case may be, and after receiving the Eucharist, I'm able to get through the rest of the day. The headaches go away, the other things like that. It truly, knowing that He's entered my body, knowing that He's kind of taken over, He's taken the wheel, as it were, allows me to truly let go of worldly concerns or whatever it might be, and really focus on what I'm supposed to be doing that day there with my students. And so it really does just kind of ground everything. I teach in the Diocese of Lincoln, actually, and we go to Mass every morning. It's such an amazing way to start our school day and begin the day by receiving Christ. It's awesome. What really kind of tipped the scales for me was Eucharistic miracles. I definitely encourage you to do some research. As I teach science, and to see the science behind every time a Eucharistic miracle through history, all the way back to the 800s, have been studied. They've all been the same blood type. They've all been myocardial heart tissue. Many studies have come back even saying that it's heart tissue from a person in their early 30s who has been through great trauma. It's no question in my mind that it is the body and blood and soul and divinity of the heart of our Lord Jesus Christ that I'm receiving when I receive the Eucharist.
I want to say that the Eucharist then becomes that little bit of battery when I find myself recharged, not just in receiving the Eucharist, but just going quietly to prayer before the Eucharist, to know that Christ is there present, and there is someone right there that I can relate to, especially when I feel empty. And that gives me the strength to go on and to do the things that I need to do.